Okay, hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have the pleasure of speaking with Jaime Noble from Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs. Jim Kovach here from Zimperium, along with JT Keating, who heads up our threat research organization, as well as our marketing team. Good morning, Jaime.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and good morning to you too, JT.
Good morning, Jim.
All right, so Jaime, by way of introduction, if you maybe could take just a few minutes to maybe frame up a little bit of your organization, kind of your role, the mission and things that are relative, just to give our audience an idea of what your organization's about.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm Jaime Noble. I'm the director for the IT security division over at the Office of Justice Programs. I'm also the Chief Information Security Officer for the Office of Justice Programs, or as we lovingly call ourselves, OJP. We're a federal agency underneath the Department of Justice. We're an agency that provides federal grants, training, technical assistance, and other resources really aimed at improving the nation's capability to prevent and reduce crime, to assist our victims, and enhance the rule of law by strengthening the criminal and juvenile justice systems.
Awesome. That's a very noble mission for sure.
For sure.
In terms of that mission, can you give the audience a sense of the workforce in terms of population, size, scope? Do they find themselves working remotely, especially in the era of COVID? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so OJP has about 6 program offices that support our state and local crime fighting efforts. And they fund, through their grants, they fund, thousands of these victim services programs and helping communities manage their needs. And then, so we have those 6 offices, and then we have like some administrative, like helping, supporting offices that includes like the Office of our General Counsel and the Office of Administration with Human Resources, the Office of the OCIO, in terms of all of the IT support that enabled the very important mission for OJP. And we are a very mobile agency. So let me just rewind pre-pandemic, back in, I think since about 2010, actually, and especially moving up through 2016. I think in 2016, they really moved forward with promoting a mobile capable workforce. We have grant managers that support the grants and all of the funds that OJP disperses to all of our grantees. And these grant managers do go out in the field. They visit with the grantees to make sure that they're monitoring, how those funds are being spent and how their commitment that they made in accepting those funds, how well those programs are performing. And so, in the tradition of OJP, those grant managers were always traveling out into the field, and so they were mobile. When the OJP got a new CIO in 2016, his vision was really to promote an environment where these grant managers, when they're going out into the field and when they are working remotely, whether that be on a plane during their travels or sitting with their grantees, that they would have an experience that was common and almost identical to the one that they would have if they were sitting at their desk. Fast forward to 2020, when we all became, working at home in the OPM's, max telework posture, to protect us during COVID-19. This mobile environment where we had the same exact, user experience in our homes or on the go as we did in the office really allowed OJP to remain productive during COVID. And so we did that by achieving or deploying a mobile desktop infrastructure, virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI environment, where you could have the same experience on any device, anytime, anywhere. And that environment was very secure because it was very centrally managed, where we could, pull those sessions if we needed to. We could patch those sessions. We could take them down. We could quarantine them, whatever we needed to do. So It allowed users to have resources, access to the resources that they needed, and that they were used to accessing within the office, with the exception, I'll say, of printing. And so, that's a capability that we tend to not allow, off-prem. But other than that, you really had all of the capabilities that you needed out, wherever you're working, whether that was from home or whether you were mobile before or in the office at headquarters.
Great, thank you for that. And so as we kind of move through the COVID era and the time frame, of course, the presidential executive order came out relative to cybersecurity. And there's different pieces of it. Certainly zero trust is a key component of it. But can you maybe talk at a high level when that came out? How did that impact y'all in terms of, did you sort of amplify what you were currently doing, as you were just mentioning, relative to VDI? Did it allow you to look for other areas where perhaps there was some improvement needed or some additional investment areas by which you had to discover and start putting plans around? Can you just maybe give us a sense of the impact and the influence of the presidential executive order?
Absolutely. So I have to say the timing was really great for us. When it came out, we felt like when we were reading through all of the major areas, we already felt like we had kind of a jump on all of those things. They were areas that were top of mind. I would say with maybe the exception of like the very expansive logging requirements. But in terms of zero trust and just information sharing, reporting vulnerabilities, expanding our vulnerability management program, prioritizing vulnerabilities for our system administrators that are responsible for patching and things like that. Those were areas that were definitely, supply chain, all of that were very much on the forefront of our mind. And right about when 2019, 2018, 2019, OJP was really getting started with a major IT modernization project that included the complete modernization and overhaul of our grant management system. So kind of the core system that supports OJP's mission. And in doing that, we really took that opportunity at that time to really, instead of just modernizing one application, well, how do we want to modernize the identity governance for this? Because this is a system that not only has external grantees, the public, police departments, law enforcement, and the like, accessing it as a public user, but we also have this system is accessed by almost everybody, or at least all of the offices within the Department of Justice. So we're one component, but we have users from FBI, the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys, Criminal Division, the OIG, ATF, all of these people that are coming in either serving in a role as a peer reviewer, maybe for some of these solicitations. Hey, is this solicitation that this grantee is submitting to get this funding for their program, is that viable? And so we do ask for input from across the department. So we really had a need to federate identities from across the department, as well as take those users from the public. And then we had, our internal grant managers who have, maybe elevated privileges within our system to approve funds or deny funds, and then, make sure that those financials are all managed appropriately throughout the life cycle of those grants. And so we really took this as an opportunity to make identity and access to data some very centric to our modernization of the grants management system. And so it was just, incredible that we were able, to kind of get a jump on that and think about it from that standpoint, almost like, if we could do everything over, how would we do it? How would we do it better? And then to have the cybersecurity executive order and all of the subsequent memos and BODs and things come down after that, just continuing to support, the road or the path that we were already on was great. So it's working out very well for us.
That's great to hear. And if I heard in all of that, so here you are doing your modernization, and you got probably a pretty full plate as it was doing that. Along comes this executive order and the whole host of things that come along with it. So it's great that you were able to absorb it all. So as we maybe move through the timeline to the current day and in the present, and I'll ask JT to weigh in here a little bit as well. Obviously, given current real world events, the threat landscape is very intense. I think everyone is at a heightened state of sensitivity. There's been the shields up warning or advisory issued by CISA not too long ago. There was also an advisory from FBI, NSA, and CISA to clear defense contractors to be at a heightened state of cybersecurity awareness and alert, and maybe look at some of the gaps that they might have. And then most recently too, and it seems to be kind of just an echo of a continuous advisory for critical infrastructure. So I say all that to say, it seems like every facet of the environment is at a heightened state. And then there's also evidence, and this is where I'll ask JT to weigh in a little bit. We certainly found some of that in a threat report, a mobile specific threat report that we just released about perhaps a little bit more fidelity in terms of what's actually going on in that landscape and the specific threats. The skyrocketing, phishing attempts, both email as well as texting. But JT, if you would mind maybe sharing some color and some context around that, and then I'll circle back and ask Jaime another question.
Yeah. So, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. And Jaime, I'm sitting here listening, and I'm chuckling about your comment about the extensive logging requirements, and and a few of the others. And I was thinking, well, if Jaime gets to say that, and they're actually way ahead of the curve on modernization, what are the other agencies thinking? Like
they're probably using other words than extensive. There might be some other vocabulary.
And I'm pretty sure that no one's going to be crying for you, Jaime. When it comes to that side of things, it could just be me. But Frank, I mean, honestly, it's really impressive what you guys have been doing. And to your point, the fact that your workforce was mobile and recognized as mobile even before all this happened, when a lot of other people all of a sudden had to go into complete triage mode and scramble mode when the pandemic hit. It probably wasn't as extensive for you guys because of where you were. So that's pretty cool. So Jim, specifically to your point and what Jim's talking about, for those folks that don't know, you can come check it out. We just got finished doing the 2022 Global Mobile Threat Report. And it's extensive. It's got data from, I think, about 70 million of the endpoints that allowed us, from customers of ours around the world, that allowed us to pull the data in. It also includes data from other places like Google Project Zero and other places along those lines. And some of the sound bites that Jim's talking about in terms of the threat landscape specific to mobile. For instance, 1 out of 4 devices around the world were susceptible or exposed to malware. Not a huge surprise, right? Even with prevention techniques in place, over 10% of the devices accessed a suspicious website from a phishing link. So, like, legitimately, and this is from our stuff, that is actually warning people, hey, don't go there. And they still went there. Imagine how much higher that number actually is from people that didn't have any protection. And we've all seen it, that, all the phishing, but mobile phishing is a major issue. There's 2 main things that are really driving the need for mobile security at the highest level. From a threat standpoint, mobile phishing is by far number 1. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because all of our traditional anti-phishing technology is inline and corporate email. Most of what you're getting on your smart devices are text, messenger, totally outside of the standard path. So it makes sense. And as Jaime was talking about, identity and credentials, that's the key. That's the key. So anything that the bad guys can do to steal credentials, the reuse potential is pretty significant unless organizations are really, really advanced, right? We've seen also 75% of the websites, the malicious websites over last year that we detected from phishing attacks were optimized for mobile. A significant portion of them even gave 404 errors if you hit them off of a desktop. So mobile phishing specifically has become a major thing. The other driver, not related to threats, but we kind of come back to it, is similar to what Jaime's talked about. O365 happens to be the main thing where everybody during the pandemic, everybody threw out, I'm going to put mail on Teams and everything. And it's become a catchphrase for basically productivity apps that people are getting access to on mobile, because all of a sudden you've got access to all the same data, like what Jaime was talking about. You have access to all the same data, but it happens to be on a mobile platform. You need to protect it, right? The other things I'll just say, and I can talk a little bit more later. But the other thing's been really interesting is, for instance, 0 days. 1/3 of the exploited 0 days last year were on mobile. And it was a 466% increase in terms of year over year. So 1/3 of all of the known exploited 0 days were on mobile. The other thing that's pretty interesting is 2/3 of those were on iOS. So when everybody is, thinking, oh, Apple's, bulletproof, the reality is Apple has done a very good job of vetting apps going into the App Store, but there's 4 attacks on mobile. There's device compromises, there's malicious networks, rogue access points, fake Wi-Fi, et cetera, mobile phishing and malicious apps. The only one Apple has historically had an advantage on was the malicious apps, because they vetted all the apps going to the App Store. But the real reason is, and it's less important here in the States as it is in the APAC region, for instance, on the Android ecosystem, going to third-party app stores has always been part of the ethos. It's just part of what people do. They just go to third-party app stores, not the Google Play Store. We happen to vet every app that goes into the Google Play Store, so we have that visibility. But it's the third-party app stores where all the malware comes from, right? So what's been interesting is on the iOS side of things is they've had this inherent advantage in the App Store, but that's very strongly looking to go away. Europe is just about to pass a law that's going to force Apple to allow side-loaded apps from third-party app stores. Our own Supreme Court, in an antitrust motion, has been questioning the same thing of, should we, is it a monopoly to have an app store like that? So we got to keep our eye on that, because architecturally, there's nothing that'll prevent malware on iOS that's different than Android. But for the time being, we can already see the targeting. And I think it's because a lot of the high value targets are on iOS, that's why the 0 days have been really focused there. So that's just a quick snapshot of the kind of threat landscape. And again, whole big threat report that we did that people can download and review for themselves.
Jaime, JT, thank you. That's an excellent breakdown. And Jaime, my question to you is specific to the 0 day, right? That's it's great that we can protect from the known bad, but what do we do when we don't know what's coming, right? And we know that they're out there. There's things like Pegasus, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with, which is a terrifying spyware for all of us, where something like that can gain access to our microphone, our camera, our private emails, our private text messages, our contacts, every personal device, whether it's used for work or not, you can bet has at a minimum our work contacts on there. So this distinction between a government device and a personal device, in many ways, it's a blend, because we're still doing work on some level. Certainly with our personal device, we might be doing more work on our government device or corporate issued device, but there is a blend there. So 0 days are frightening in many ways. The other aspect to that is tying it to again, back to zero trust and the presidential executive order. Can you give us your thoughts on sort of how you might be thinking about endpoints broadly, and then from a 0 day detection or 0 day perspective, how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah. So endpoints are really all encompassing, right? It's almost every single thing. We're even including, in that thought, networking devices, although that's a totally separate challenge. But in terms of users, let's just kind of keep it there for the focus of this segment of the conversation. We're looking at our laptops as that end user device, as well as that mobile device that is issued. They are corporately issued for OJP and really the entire department. And I think in terms of thwarting 0 days, things I think that our best proactive measure that we can take is to really be vigilant in deploying and having those EDR solutions in place to manage those devices, and having an architecture in place that's really focusing on identity and taking that data-centric approach, and really contextualizing every single connection and approving it and looking at it every single time. So it won't matter really if a user has access to the network or not, whether that be a bad actor or the user themselves, but the access that they have or that they're trying to get, right, will really be focused on, should that user have access to that application in that context, right? And if that's not the case, we're making a decision, a policy decision, and we're denying that access. So that's really the approach that we're taking. And then in terms of management of our servers and other infrastructure where privileged access, is really, really key, and that's where that's happening. We've tried, we've deployed a privileged access management, program, so that we're managing all of that in that manner. So really keeping the focus on identity and whether or not those users should have access, to those environments. But it's been tough. It's been tough with mobile and mobile devices specifically. So I know JT was saying that in terms of like phishing, and we do run phishing campaigns on the regular for all of our users. And it's interesting in looking at those reports, where are people, looking at their email? They're looking at it on their phone for the most part, right? If I want to get up and take a walk or go up and do a load of laundry or something, I'm walking away from my computer. But most of the time I have my mobile device with me, right? So someone can contact me on Teams or, email me, and I'll look at an email, while I'm doing something or maybe I'll even have Siri read it out loud to me, right? But, in terms of those devices, EDR has been very challenging on the mobile device. I don't think that the industry is really fully there. We haven't done a ton of testing, but we do manage it from an MDM. All of our phones are managed by that. We have, to make it simple, reduce complexity, we have one phone that we're using, one iOS that we're using, so we can manage things that way. All of our applications are on the allow list or whitelisted. We don't do things. We don't deny by exception. We're looking and making sure that we have like approved things that are vetted, and so we just deny everything unless it's on that approved list. And that has made it easier. I think there may have been, when mobile devices first came out, there were some agencies that were just allowing their users to download anything that they wanted on there. And that's definitely, not the most appropriate way to go about it. And in terms of people wanting to be more mobile, I just mentioned me wanting to just walk around my house, and that's taking mobile to like another extreme. But yeah, I want access to Teams. I want access to email. We're slowly trying to make more applications mobile. Maybe ServiceNow. Maybe you could approve things and other applications. But we've deployed derived credentials on all of our mobile devices to again make sure that the people who are accessing those applications from those devices are who they say they are, and that they have access to only the applications and the data that they should.
Yeah.
In line with that strategy.
You brought up a couple of things there, and JT, I think you have some comments as well, but just a couple of brief things. So EDR, right? Certainly EDR. So mobile EDR, I think, is maybe where you were hinting at in terms of extending the same types of protections and detections, EDR, traditional EDR to mobile. So we oftentimes refer to that as a mobile EDR. The other is, you had mentioned taking your mobile device with you if you wanted to go walk around. So there was a reference to Director Jen Easterly over at CISA about making cybersecurity a kitchen table, quote unquote, kitchen table issue to all the governors and mayors recently. And that struck me because the one device that a lot of us bring to the kitchen table is the mobile device. We're not walking up to the kitchen table with our laptop and saying, hey, everyone. Probably not a good idea for family relations, but the mobile device is at our kitchen table. So we can all certainly relate with that being a part of us. And sometimes I joke with folks and I say, hey, take your mobile device and go put it in another room and close the door and walk away and count how many minutes goes by before you start developing some anxiety about where your mobile device is. So I think we are absolutely connected to it. But JT, I think you had a comment you wanted to make as well.
Yeah, well, the first comment I'll make is my family is perfect. My kids who, they've never brought, I mean, we have a 100% no phone. I don't know who those people are. I hear about them and I hear they're great, and I'm sure they eat healthier than me. And it's like they exercise all the time. It's like, whatever. No, you're completely right. I was thinking about the, kind of the mobile EDR part, and also just, again, just the complexity. I had a chance to have a conversation, a panel yesterday with leaders of security for Oracle and Deloitte. And one of the things we were talking about in terms of trends was the trend that has been going for quite some time, but is now becoming a practical reality and a necessity, the trend away from alerts towards action. And as Jaime was talking about, we're going to take this information we have and we're going to decide what we're going to give you. I mean, that is zero trust, and Jim and I, joke a lot of the time about the fact that, I'm supposed to be the marketing guy. So I'm supposed to be the guy that loves throwing zero trust at everything, it's just slap it on. It's going to be fun. But even though I'm not a big fan of buzzwords, the principles of zero trust are absolutely there. And as Jaime was talking about, I need to assess your identity and the device's identity to make sure I even know who this person is and what they're on. And then what is the risk posture of the environment that they're coming from, and then making that decision. And traditional EDR, that has handled that for the traditional endpoints. But the biggest complication, and we know these because we actually power many of the EDR products, mobile offerings now, the vendors. The biggest difference in mobile, there's two. One is all apps are in containers, so they don't get to mess around with each other like we're used to on the traditional side of things. But the biggest issue is that the kernel of the operating system is locked down. As security has evolved, it used to, whoever's lowest on the stack wins, right? And as security evolved, the bad guys started doing things like rootkits on traditional endpoints where they were getting into the operating system. And so all the endpoint security companies, we needed to actually come in below them to be able to self-defend. So they're built and wired and programmed to pull data and to operate in the operating system. Well, on iOS and Android, Chromebooks, and even the modern OSs that are coming out, the operating systems are locked down. So it creates a blind spot unless you've been architected for that world. But getting that kind of visibility across those attacks, including some that are relatively new. Now they're not new to Jaime, but they're new to most of the world. For instance, the network. The dumbest thing about smartphones is the phone introduces itself to the network, not the other way around. So your phone just literally just walks around and goes, "Hey, what's up? Are you Starbucks?" And all the network has to do is go, "Yes." and the device connects. Now, there's things you can do if you're really hyper security sensitive to change those settings, but most people don't do that, right? So we're used to having devices in most of the world, not highly mobile like Jaime's world. We spent billions of dollars on network security, firewalls, and and our laptop or desktop is sitting inside of that protected little world. Of course, I trust the network. Why would I not trust the network, right? So again, something that's different for the EDR guys is you need to detect whether or not the network is fake, because you could be sitting on a bad Wi-Fi and they're taking all your traffic, and they're so. And that's one of the things I think is going to be totally fun going forward, is when we go from EDR to XDR, and then again, another buzzword, but I love the concept of, let's say I've got the ability to detect a malicious network on my mobile phone. And if it's on my phone and it says, uh-oh, bad Wi-Fi, the next thing should be, where's his laptop? And if his laptop is on that same Wi-Fi, then to your point, Jaime, that'll be something where it's like, okay, hold up, we didn't get any notification from that laptop, but we now have a new picture of that person, and so we're going to change their access. It's these sensors and then action. I think is going to be really cool, but non-trivial, to say the least.
Yeah, and I'll just echo, a little bit of the sentiment about when it comes to the mobile device. Some of the articles I've seen of late have said, hey, before you click on something, stop and think. Well, we're humans, and sometimes we're not thinking, and sometimes we're in a rush. We're at an airport. We're in line.
We're doing our laundry.
We're doing all kinds of things. We're in line, getting ready to board the plane, and you're looking at your boarding pass, and it's, beyond group 3. So there's no way your bag is going to make it. And so you're thinking about how you have to check it. It's just stress overload, right? And we're all getting back to travel is where I'm going.
Mobile, mobile is designed for quick click. I mean, you see something, boom, boom. I mean, we are way quicker to hit things. Plus, there's no ability to compare anything on mobile.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
It's a pain in the rear end to copy, new browser, paste. Just no click.
To check for those subtle nuances of a / or a 2 O's in Google, or a 3 O's in Google versus 2 O, just those little subtleties, which we know.
At the same time, you're trying to decide whether or not to put bleach in, right? Right, Jaime? I mean, it's like, that's a lot going through your head right there.
That's right. Hey, Jaime, I think you clicked on mute accidentally there. We couldn't hear you on that.
I did. I was saying, and now there's a red sock in with the whites.
That's right. Right. You
that's worse than fishing.
You've got all these distractions. And my point being is when you get that urgent text that says somebody just charged your credit card $2,000, you click here to reject it. You're not thinking. So you click it. And guess what? Now you're hacked. So my larger point being is we're all humans, and it shouldn't be left to the human to make that go, no-go decision on whether or not that they're about to get hacked or not. They should have a backstop, a safety net, if you will, on their mobile device in particular, relative to gaining access to infrastructure. So I know we're coming up on time. Hopefully, the audience will find this informative and helpful. Jaime, were there any concluding thoughts or suggestions or things for the audience to consider, or what would perhaps your recommendation be on where to get started with some of this?
Yeah, no, it's certainly daunting. So I don't want to make it seem like I have all the answers or I have it easy. I just think we were, maybe just timing wise, in a better position, to be better positioned to have all these things coming down the pike. There were things that were already on the forefront of our mind. There are certainly challenges. I mentioned M2131 and all the logging. That's certainly going to be really challenging. There are so many things to unpack in terms of just, system performance, and whether or not, some of those things are going to be meaningful. Who's going to be reviewing all of these things? Do we have the capabilities in place for maybe, applying some AI to make some of those decisions based on some of the alerting that we're seeing, so that we can have some of those dynamic decision points, and that whether we're blocking or allowing or quarantining or doing certain things as a result of those logs. I think certainly, in the EDR capabilities are really exciting. And in even some of the capabilities with respect to antivirus and behavior-based antivirus, I think are really exciting. So some of that next gen AV capabilities, I think that folks should keep an eye out on. I know that there are a lot of agencies and corporations are blending, letting users carry one device. You have to carry two devices. I think it makes it a little bit easier when you're like, okay, I'm not going to be getting an email on my corporate device about my credit card or a prize I won or an Amazon gift card. Hopefully that separation kind of allows people to not only have a better work-life balance, but also be mindful on, what they're clicking on and when, for sure. And I think, having, identity centric decision-making points and coupling that with, being data centric, I think is definitely the way to go. So there's definitely a lot to unpack. I know there's a lot of mandates out there, but I think there's a lot of good stuff. And hopefully it will help us, not only modernize our IT, but when we're modernizing IT, I think that the best advice I can give is when your organization is modernizing IT, use that as an opportunity to modernize your cybersecurity as well. They should really go hand in hand. That's in the executive order as well, baking all that security in with like the new software. So really, all the CISOs out there, all the ISSOs, all of the system administrators and security professionals, use these things as tools to talk to your management and your leadership and make sure that the budget, the funds are supporting everything that you need to do to adhere to the executive order guidance, all of the memorandums, all of the BODs. And if you make sure you're baking that in and getting in good with all those things, you can achieve success in those areas, and we can feel good about it.
Absolutely. JT, did you have a final comment?
Well, I mean, I've been joking about, Jaime having it all together, and relatively speaking, you do, with the exception of the red sock. But the thing I'll say that really kind of jumped out at me, I mean, obviously a lot to unpack, and Jaime, thank you very much for the time. It's been great hearing it. The last thing that Jaime mentioned, I think, is one of the most important, and what we've seen even on our side of things. It starts with the business initiative. What is that digital transformation? Everything that we're a part of is hooked onto some business, some organizational transformational initiative. And to Jamie's point, the more those are blended in together and thought about in advance, the more things go in a streamlined fashion. So I would agree 100% with what Jaime is saying. And thank you again, Jaime. It was a lot of fun, making fun of you and laughing but honestly learning a lot, because how much stuff you guys need to keep up with all these different acronym soups and directives and everything. It's not easy, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks, JT.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. This was a really fun discussion. I'm glad we could get some humor in there. And, I think, there is a lot. It is very daunting. But if you really look, they all kind of tie together too. So
they do. They all kind of come together, certainly under the order and then under zero trust. I'll close with, for folks who weren't overly familiar with 2131, OMB 2131, the logging requirements, as Jaime was affectionately referring to, because it is quite extensive and expansive. I would concur with that. Is we just released an article. I think folks in the audience will find it informative, on Federal News Network. So I think if you just maybe go to FNN and do a quick Zimperium OMB 2131, it probably should come up in terms of the search. or maybe just do a Google search on it. It should come up at FNN, but there's some good content in there. I think it'll be educational and informative for folks who are not overly familiar with 2131 for sure. But it is part of the FISMA reporting requirements. So to Jamie's point, if you're an executive agency, you kind of got to do it, right? You got to pay attention to it. So with that, thanks for your time, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.